So, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are listening. This is the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and as we build up to the new season 2025, we have another very special guest, and this is a big one because we are delighted to be joined by Per Jarle Dalum, who is the technical director of Rosenborg BK. Arguably, or some might say the biggest club in Norway, some might say the biggest club in the region. So a huge moment for the podcast, of course, to have such a special guest. We've been trying to sort of track someone down from RBK for many years. So thank you so much, Per, for joining us. Fantastic to have you. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about the technical director role, what it's like to be a technical director at such a big club in the region, how you build a squad. Also, you'll learn a little bit about some of the players. There's one or two players that fans might be aware of as well, the big players at Rosenborg, and also just the general trajectory of the club over the past few years. So settle down and tune in. And Per, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
Thank you for having me as well. I'm good. It's of course in the middle of the preseason now, so everyone is excited and looking forward to a new season. So it's good to sit down and talk to you about the club and how things look.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really good to have you on the show. And of course, as you mentioned that you're currently in Norway and a lot of the squad is in Spain currently. And that was going to be one of my first questions. In fact, the sort of just talk to me about the preseason preparations before we get into your role and everything like that. How the preseason preparations going, and why do so many sort of Scandinavian teams go to Marbella or go to Spain for the preseason break? Is it weather reasons or is there other factors?
Yeah, definitely. It's due to weather reasons. I think every Norwegian club and every Scandinavian club they tend to go south in the early months of the year, and for us it's no different. It's been a long tradition for that. So we've been to Portugal in Algarve, playing in the Atlantic Cup, and then we were back home here for 2 weeks. We did a small camp also in somewhere close to Trondheim due to our sponsors and everything. And now the team is back in the south in Marbella, where we will play 2 friendly matches. And then when they arrive back home from that camp, it's only 2 friendly matches on home ground before we start up the season. So even though we have the longest preseason in the world, I think it's nearly time to go, and things will go fast. So we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's a very long preseason. And sometimes, even some of the teams are still in Europe, but they're currently season finished months ago. If you look at some of the clubs like Molde, for example. Talk to me about, obviously, when we first contacted you, and you mentioned in brief your role as a technical director. How much involvement would you have, say, we'll talk about the technical director role in a minute, but how much involvement do you have in the sort of pre-season planning and that kind of thing? What's your sort of job at this point of the year? Do you have to coordinate a lot of the pre-season activities, or what are you sort of working on at this moment in time in the year normally?
Yeah, no, I don't have any particular responsibility in terms of the planning. It's the sport director and the head coach. They plan most of the things regarding the first team. I work closely with them, of course, in terms of squad planning and also in terms of scouting. But they plan the season, and they also have of course logistics people who will make the plans for them. But it's mostly the head coach and the coaching staff, and of course also the physical department who plan the preseason. So I'm not involved in that.
And what, at this moment in time, you mentioned, say, for example, scouting. What is your main sort of tasks at this moment as you build to the new season? Is it a lot of kind of squad building, or what is your main focus now? Is a lot of that work already done, or how are things with you at the moment, at this current moment in time?
Yeah, if you go straight there, the scouting, of course, is a big responsibility in my role. I'm basically also the head of the scouting, and we have had a good planning of this transfer window, and we managed to do a lot of deals early. And I think that is good, because then we also get those players into the squad, into the preseason, having that long build-up with the team, and can integrate fully into the squad. So we did important to also get in some players with more experience. We had the youngest squad in the Eliteserien last year, and we planned for bringing in some players with the quality to be in the starting 11, but also to have the experience and bring in maybe some age into the young squad. And we did mostly according to plan, and we're quite happy with it. And as things stands now, I think we won't do anything more this transfer window, but you never know, things can happen in the coming weeks. But I think we have the squad that we are going to compete with now.
Yeah, and for those who obviously don't know, I mean, I think most people who listen to this podcast will know Rosenborg, a massive club in Norway, 26 times champions, based in Trondheim. The season just passed, finished fourth. Obviously, the year before that, it was a sort of like mid-table finish, really, kind of 8th, 9th, I think. So the trajectory of the club is kind of, a bit of a down few years. And then last season, kind of a stronger finish back into sort of European spots, roughly. When we first contacted you, of course, you mentioned, I just want to read what you said exactly, that your role as a technical director, in short, is that you are the head of the sports strategy, implementation of it, and the game plan through the club. I'm also in charge of the scouting and analysis department, working on developing the sporting side and working closely with the university and other institutions to develop different aspects of the football operations. Per, tell us, like, from the point of view of Norwegian football, often we've talked about Rosenborg on the podcast, and we kind of say that you're like the Manchester United maybe of Norway, or the Liverpool of that region. How big is Rosenborg compared to, say, the other clubs from your perspective? Because you mentioned different aspects of what you have to do, things like university. And, it's a bit of a giant of a club, isn't it, compared to, say, other clubs in Norway? From your perspective, describe it from your point of view.
Yeah, and I think the comparison with Manchester United and Liverpool is quite good, because of course we are historically the most successful club. We were for a very, very long time, almost like Bayern Munich in Germany. We won many times in a row when we played Champions League many years in a row. And I think what separates those clubs that always bounce back to the top and always stays in the top is that they always is able to develop, always is able to maybe foreseen what will happen in the future and be always ahead of things. And with the Rosenborg, of course, I can't talk for what happened before I came in here in 2018, but I think we were too set on focusing on the past, trying to live up to this idea that we had in the past with this head coach who was here for many years, who almost revolutionized Norwegian football, together with also Drillo, who was coach of the national team. But after that, it's always been talk about what we used to do. We always done like this and everything, and we tried many different ways to find it back. And then sometimes also they tried to do other things, do new stuff, and try to distance from the past, and that didn't work either. So every time they failed, they tried to bring back what gave them success in the past. But I think we also have to mention that they did quite good in 2014 and 2018, winning 4 times in a row and being on the top again. But then we had a massive fall again after, and it was only 2 years ago that the club did a massive work to gain back the position. But this time I think it's different, because we started looking at the structure of the club. We started looking at every department inside the club, what we need to do, what is the benchmark internationally, rather than looking back in the past and trying to copy something that worked for many years ago. But the football is developing in a rapid tempo, and you need to keep up, and we didn't do for a very long time. But I think now that we have a good start last season with the team bouncing back, managed to get the 4th position, and I think now we have the foundation to build on. And there's still a lot of work to do, but I think we are on the right path, and build again to maybe be the success that Rosenborg was. But to be that, we need to build to be able to compete for the championship every season. We may not win the championship every season, but we need to be prepared for, and we need to work for, and be as a club structured to be able to compete for the championship every season. I think that's the most important thing. And if we do that, and we will do good, then the championships will come. For sure.
Yeah, you mentioned there the sort of Bayern Munich of Norway, and the last title for Rosenborg, Cup and League, was 2018. So it's coming up to sort of 7 years, and if you look at the parallel with, say, Manchester United, who obviously, you mentioned they're kind of looking to the past too much, maybe, and had a sort of shadow figure of a manager who was a bit of a legendary manager. There's a lot of parallels there, isn't there, with some other institutions as well. Even if you look at, say, over at Sweden, IFK Gothenburg, for example, is another one like that. The sort of giant clubs that then fall a little bit. You said that you've been there since 2018, essentially.
Yeah.
Talk to me about, because obviously the season before last, obviously you finished fourth, the season just gone, 2024. 2023 was like the low point, really, wasn't it? Finishing, like you say, 8th, 9th. Before that, had finishes kind of 3rd, 4th, the previous years before that. So how, that season 2023, how bad was that in terms of having to reset everything? Was that the trigger point for that, or has there been other factors that sort of made the club, since you've been there, sort of start to really focus on resetting everything, like as you mentioned it?
Yeah, I would say also, of course, 2023 was the point where it became clear for everyone, and also for the people outside the club to see that we had to do some changes. But I think it also started a bit in the 2022 season, when we had a rough start of the season and didn't play good, and we also were a bit, I wouldn't say lucky, but we managed to sign this striker Kasper Tengstedt in the summer, who we had been following for a while, who just came in, and he was fantastic. He was you could just give him the ball and he would do something crazy with it. So he was a big part of us managing to get the 3rd place at the end. And we also had this one other player on loan from Ajax, Victor Jensen, who also was fantastic. He was moving from playing as a number 6 to a number 8 in the fall, and that was also a major part of us securing the 3rd place. But even though we managed to come 3rd, we looked at the performance of the team and the underlying performance, the statistics of it, that we didn't produce a lot, we didn't have a lot of chances, we didn't have a lot of shots, we didn't get into the opposition 16 meter, as we call it in Norway, enough. So with selling Kasper Tengstedt to Benfica that winter with a record transfer fee for us, and also losing Victor Jensen, who was on loan, and we also sold some other players with a lot of quality. It almost was it was doomed from day one, the season after, and then the underlying performance of the team really started to show, and we also saw that this isn't the Rosenborg. We weren't playing the Rosenborg football, because even though you shouldn't be grasping the past all the time, I think the identity of the club always needs to be there. So if Rosenborg isn't playing attacking football, if Rosenborg isn't trying to dominate the games, if we are not pressing high, if we are not wanting to score more, even if you score the first goal, we will lose the patience of the crowd, and then it came the kind of the climax the year after, when we also lost in the cup to a 3rd tier team, and we did really bad performance in the league. Then we already had started the process of structuring the club and building out the strategy for the next couple of years, and then we then had to change the head coach that summer. So we said goodbye to Kjetil Rekdal, and then we took a coach from the academy to have as a caretaker. When we started, while we started working with who is going to be our next head coach, but then we had a much more clear vision of what we wanted. We had the strategy, we had the game model, we had everything we needed to to go out and say we want this and this from a head coach. And then we did a really good process where we interviewed a lot of coaches. We watched a lot of games. We scouted the head coaches, you can say. And then after a while, it was very clear for us that Alfred Johansson in FC Copenhagen under 19 was the right guy for the work. He was young. He was, for many criticized us for taking a coach without the experience and blah 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 blah. But he stood for what we wanted. He stood for that offensive mindset, high pressing football, dominating games with the ball, and we saw what he did with the youth team in Copenhagen. That this is the right person, and if we can put him into the structure and building a good structure around the team, we were certain that this is what we wanted, and we see that now that we perform better, even with the youngest squad in the league, as I mentioned before, and we think this is a good setup for us, and we are happy with how it's going, and you can almost say that also the improvement is even bigger than we expected the first season. We wanted to be better, of course, but and if we could get into the Europe qualification, that's good. But we didn't expect everything to go so fast, to be honest.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you mentioned a few elements there to touch on. I mean, it's interesting, like you said, that the average age of the team, we went from, our partners Y-Scout, we have access to the sort of Y-Scout data to be able to look at underlying numbers, and the average age of the team in 2023 season was 26.8, which was around sort of like mid-table of the league in terms of average age. And then last season, like you say, it was the youngest, 23.6, the average age of the squad, which was the youngest in Eliteserien. The next youngest is 23.9, which is Haugesund. And then Fredrikstad, average age 25. So it's a big, between you and Haugesund, there's a big age difference there. How much work went into? I mean, I want to ask you about the manager in a second in terms of how you sort of analysed new head coaches and that process. Before asking that, how big a job was it to sort of reduce the average age of that squad? And for you as a technical director, must have been a lot of real thorough work doing to reduce that average age from sort of nearly 27 to sort of 23.
Yeah, of course, and also there's also a lot of other factors also here that we have to remember. Also in 2018, when we won the last championship, I think the average age of the squad was above 30. So it also was a process that had to happen, of course, almost rebuilding the squad. So that started also a while before I came into it. It was the sport director Mikael Dorsin who had to do most of that work. But and also at the same time we had some injuries on players that could maybe have made the age average higher, but it's also we have a good academy. We produce good players from our academy, and now we see that a lot of players coming up at the same time that are doing really well. But so I wouldn't say that the strategy of the club was to go that low with the average age, but it happened due to some circumstances, and also with players coming up from the academy that just were so good that we had to do it. But we want the ideal age average is a bit higher, and of course it would vary, but we need to be certain that we don't end up in an age average about 30 again, because that is just bad squad planning if you end up there. So that was maybe a long and not so concrete answer to the question, but a lot of factors are happening at the same time, you could say, and also the economy of course also plays a part in it. We are of course not winning in a very long time. The money flow isn't good either, so that also plays a part in it. But we will, of course, big part of the strategy of the club is now to have a higher focus on the own development players, younger players from the academy, and then bringing in also players with a high selling value and that makes, of course, the age difference, age average a bit low. That's for sure. But we see with even a low age average, we can still compete in the Eliteserien, and maybe with some experienced players in now that I mentioned earlier, we can even compete even more, I think. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's a sort of 16, 17-year-old or 18-year-old player that we'll talk about in a bit, maybe as well. Some listeners might be aware of, but that obviously brings the average age down when you've got such a talent like that. Let me ask you, Per, what are the key practical skills that it takes to be a good technical director? What are the skills you need in your job, like the human qualities or the characteristics that, in your opinion, make a good technical director? And how do you learn those traits?
Yeah. Of course, I can only speak for myself and our club, but in my role in this club at this moment, I think the most important skill for me is to be structured, because in the football world things are happening so fast. The head coach, he's all busy with his focus, next game every time, and in this football area, games are coming a lot faster than before. It's if you are where you want to be, and we want to be in Europe, you play games 2 times a week. That's the reality, and so the head coach's focus needs to always be sharp on the present, and the sport director, of course, has a lot of tasks with transfers, with re-signing the contract, and he will also need to be sharp in the present. And for my role is as a technical director, my job is to focus more on the long term. I focus on the future, and for that to work together with the short term focus that a head coach needs to have, I think the structure is the most important thing. You need to prepare for everything. You need to have different scenarios, and you need also to be able to communicate effective in a busy working environment. So structure is for sure the most important thing. But I also think that you need to be, as I'm talking about, of course, not being so focused on the present or even the past. You need to look ahead. You need to be ahead of things, and of course, it could be small things, but also bigger things like the club structure. But it can also be like squad planning, as we talked about, seeing what happens in the 2 or 3 months when this will happen, and then 1 or 2 years when this contract runs out, and so on. And also, of course, this player from the academy, he is now 14-year-old, but in 3 years' time, he will probably be in the first team. We need to plan for that. Yeah. And of course, I think it's also a big advantage for me to also have a big knowledge about the club. Of course, I'm from the region. I grew up watching this club, and now been working here for 7 years. But I think knowledge of the club's identity, how the people outside the club is expecting to how they expect to us to play, how they expect us to behave, everything like that. I think that is important also when we talk about the structure and the strategy of the club. I think that is important.
And how did you sort of learn those technical skills? Did you study it, for example, in your past? How did you sort of get into the role, if that makes sense from your point of view? Like you said, you're from the region. How did you get into the role, and how did you help learn those skills? Because I imagine, and maybe second part of the question is like, how do you interact with the manager and the sporting director? Because there must be conversations like they're maybe looking more game to game, and you have to look at the longer picture. So how does that dynamic work from a communication point of view?
Yeah. From the beginning of your question, I started coaching very early. When I was 18-year-old, I grew up with some friends of mine that were a lot more talented than me when we played football, and a couple of them also made it into Eliteserien and national teams and so on. So I think already then I had a good eye for talent. But I stopped when I was 18, stopped playing, and started coaching right away. And then after coaching youth grassroots for some years, I went to study sports management. So I studied sport management in Molde actually, and then had some time there also when I coached older players, under 19 players, and also first team, fourth tier division players, and then also started working in Rosenborg. I started with the young, the youth in the academy, working with the under 14, and also was head of the under 14 program, and then just took on roles as they appeared. First, I was working also as an analyst in the first team, then as a scout, and then head of the scouting, and now technical director. So I think for many years working inside the football clubs, even amateur clubs, but also now in the professional club, you tend to adapt a bit, and then as you see how the organization is working, how you see the different roles working together and everything. I think for me it was just my personality, my interest in also the structuring of the club more than maybe the coaching side of it. It's just made me kind of grow into this role, I think. And you mentioned how is the communication working with the head coach and the sport director. I think a big advantage for me is that I'm pretty calm when things go bad or things go good. I don't get frustrated. I don't cry. I don't share like hell when we when we win. I keep quite calm in many situations. Yeah, and I think that also is important for inside a club, that you cannot lose your head even if you are winning or losing. You need to look ahead. You need to be focused, and I think maybe that is my biggest advantage if you talk about the communication with head coach and sport director, because they, even though we have a very good the sport director and head coach, they're also not losing their heads when things happen. But I think staying calm, being prepared, and have a good structure and plan for things makes the communication with them also easier. As I said, they have a busy schedule, and you need to
from a sort of like a decision-making point of view as well. You know, like when there might be scenarios where, like you just mentioned there, you might have a 14-year-old in the academy, but your sporting director might say, listen, we've got a really good player here. Like just from a decision-making point of view as well, how does the dynamic work in terms of who has the final decision, or how are decisions taken collectively? Could you just talk to us a bit about that as well? Even maybe when you recruited the head coach, you know, there might have been conversations between yourself, the board, those kind of big decisions about transfers and recruitment.
The way we are structured now is that the sport director is the one in charge. Traditionally in Norway, it's been a lot of clubs who has the head coach too much in power, I will say. Head coaches are short-term employees, and I think the main problem with a lot of football clubs and even Rosenborg is that you put too much on the plate for the head coach, and the head coach makes too many decisions. So that is one thing, as I mentioned, when we restructured the club back in 2023, that was the first thing we did, that the sport directors need to be on top. And of course he has the CEO and the board above him again, but the head coach needs to be reporting to the sport director. That's for me, it's the most important thing. So in that case, that answers also the question. It's the sport director who has the final word if we don't agree. But luckily we have a good discussion on everything, and we kind of see things a lot in the same way. But of course, sometimes I can challenge a decision or challenge a discussion just to also make sure that we do the right thing. But we have good conversations, we have good discussions, and mostly we agree on it. And of course, also in this structure, it's much easier because the head coach is appointed into this system. He knows what he went to. He knows the club's philosophy. He knows the club's strategy, and then also it's much easier and makes the workflow even smoother, I will say.
Of course, yeah. I mean, talk to me about you talked about the cultural reset maybe in 2023 and the big, after the season that didn't go so well, finishing ninth. Could you also talk to me a bit about, the rivalries, obviously, in Norwegian football, the the dynamic is kind of, if you look at the last sort of 20 years, I remember Rosenborg in the Champions League group stages, playing big games, and that they were like the big Norwegian club. And then if you look at the sort of last, say, maybe 10 years, 7 to 10 years, maybe, this new dog has arrived in town, isn't it? Bodø Glimt, who have kind of started, winning multiple championships over the last sort of 3-4 years, and kind of establishing themselves in Europe. Obviously, you've got other rivals as well, the likes of Molde, who you've had to compete against. Talk to me about the how you respond to that rivalry, if that makes sense, because obviously, look at it from a different point of view. It might be a bit like, say, it's not the same example, but the big clubs in England, maybe when Chelsea first came along, like Chelsea hadn't really won anything since the 50s, and they came along with Mourinho and they started to be the dominant force. And then the bigger, other clubs like, say, the Manchester United, Liverpool, they have to react to the new challenger, right? And maybe it's a similar parallel with Rosenborg. You've kind of got this new dog in town that you have to compete against. And how big is that? How big is that an impact on Norwegian football in general, and also Rosenborg as a club? Just like the rise of Glimt, or is it something you don't really pay attention to, or have you had to learn from them? Just talk that dynamic. How has that affected Rosenborg as a club, if you know what I mean? Because not to say that they've sort of stolen your thunder, but they kind of come in and this new upstart. And obviously, for you as the traditional powerhouse, do you pay much attention to responding to that, or do you just have to think differently? How's it? Talk to me about that dynamic over the last sort of 5-6 years.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting question, and also interesting topic, because I think I will imagine that this also can be the same as you mentioned with the other big teams when Chelsea started making a fuss in the Premier League. But I think from before Rosenborg got panicked when other teams came along, of course, Rosenborg. You can say that the first golden era of Rosenborg that we lived through is done in 2006, 2007. 2007 they played the Champions League, obviously playing 1-1 against Chelsea actually. But I think also they sacked the coach the day after or something. But I think when that happened, after that, when other teams started winning, and especially when Molde at the first in 2012, 13, 14 with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer started to maybe dominate a bit, winning consecutive years. I think Rosenborg panicked and tried to gain back the advantage fast, trying to just, if we spend money on it, then we will be good. And that's what they did. And of course that sometimes works, but it doesn't work for a long time. And even after also 2018, when we didn't won when we won the last league title, then I remember when we won and lifted the trophy in 2018, Bodø Glimt was there. We played them in the last match, and they were there celebrating because they managed to secure the place in the Eliteserien. And we were there standing with a trophy and celebrating, but not celebrating a lot because we had won 4 times in a row. So Bodø Glimt almost celebrated even more. So that was fun situation. But after that, at the beginning when Bodø Glimt started to perform, I think the same thing happened. We panicked and we tried to gain back the advantage fast, and we didn't manage to. And then, of course, I think there was some jealousy and some frustration about Bodø Glimt is succeeding. But I think now the last years and from when I came into this role is of course Bodø Glimt is I think it's a good example. It's good for us to see that they have been working with the same structure now and with the same type of system for a very long time. And if you do, you can do good. And that is what we need to do also. We can't pour money into it and think that this is a quick fix. We need to work good for a very long time. And if we will be good next year, or even if it takes 2 years or 3 years, we will still need to do the same. And maybe some way along the road, we need to say goodbye to some people or change some people here and there. But we need to focus on working on the same thing for a very long time, because this is what we believe in, and this is what will make us good. So for now, to answer the question, is we don't focus a lot on the rivalry. Of course, it's good for for the fans. It's more games that has a higher temperature, and also I think the players among themselves they love it. When we went there last season and beat them, there was a lot of celebration, of course. But that's good. We need those games and we need those rivalries, and hopefully now also Molde will come back competing in the top. They had a drop last 2 seasons with a 5th place, so I think also they are ready to go. So it will be fun matches, but from a club perspective, we can't focus on what other clubs are doing and be jealous about it. We can look at it and take inspiration from it, but we need to do what we believe in, and if we do, we will succeed.
Yeah, of course. And it's probably been quite good for Norwegian football in a way as well, in terms of generating interest and even revenue from a certain point of view. Because
of course, and you also see that with Bodø/Glimt doing good in Europe, a lot of teams also focusing on our league in terms of scouting and interest in the players, and we see that they bring transfer value up, and that's also good for us. So
it's true.
So even though we want to be that team, the Norwegian league needs a team that is doing good and doing good in Europe. That's for sure. So hopefully we can be up there with them and maybe have two teams doing good in Europe, or even 3. Molde also tends to do good in the European Cup. So
I mean, the plan for Rosenborg is obviously to get back to the top of Norwegian football. Where you, I suppose, you sort of feel like you should be. From your point of view, how I know you've sort of talked a bit about how you've set the plan in motion. How difficult do you think it is to get back to the top of Norwegian football, or do you think that you're on the right path already, or how sort of internally within the club and even with the fans and everything, how big a challenge is it sort of seen as to sort of get back there, and how do you the steps that you need to take to get there? From your point of view, what are maybe the next steps?
Yeah, of course, we know that we have everything in place to be the biggest team in Norway. We have the biggest stadium. We have the most fans. We have, of course, now we don't have maybe most money, but we have the biggest sponsor budget, and we also have a lot of interest. Not even in Trondheim, but also from the whole country. When we go play away games, it's almost like playing at home. So, but the one thing we are missing is of course the football part of it. We need to be also best in every aspect of the sport. So I think the difficult part of it was to get the club to realize that, because we are focusing a lot on we are the biggest. We need to win. But as I said initially, we need to prepare ourselves to be able to compete. And if we do that, then we will, because we have all the other pieces of the puzzle. We just missed the last one. And if we can find that and put that into it, it will be perfect.
What would you say is the biggest challenge as a technical director? In your day-to-day role, what's the hardest sort of or the most challenging aspect?
A good question. But of course, it's the day has only 24 hours, and unluckily I have to sleep some hours of it also. But of course, I'm not only working with the men's first team. I'm also working with the academy. I'm also working with the women's team and also the girls' academy, trying to implement this football philosophy and the club strategy into every aspect of it, and help those who are working with the sport director of the women's team, the academy director, try to help them also to develop that part of the club. So I will say a lack of time. I wish I could do more. And also the club is also split into 2 different areas. So the women's team is in another training facility than us. So we have to travel back and forward if we are to meet people. So hopefully in some years we can build a training facility for the whole club. That will certainly make it easier and less challenging to be able to give every person, every department of the club enough time, because they all deserve it. And also, of course, we are not that many. We lack a lot of manpower in some aspects compared to other clubs, especially other clubs playing in Europe. We don't have a lot of scouts. We don't have a lot of analysts. But we try to do the best with what we have, and we have good people working with us. And also, I think tomorrow or even the next day after, we will announce an internship program in scouting, trying to get more people on deck to help us with that. So I will say also manpower is it's a challenge, but we are, of course, compared to other Norwegian teams, we are not doing that bad.
Yeah, I know. We've interviewed. I mean, one of the most recent interviews we had was Västerås in Sweden, and they have, I think, three full-time staff for the whole club. So yeah, like comparatively, you're okay, but even then, it's still a challenge. It can be still a challenge for time, I imagine, for 100%. And regards to the internship scouting, I think there might be a few listeners who might be quite interested.
I hope so.
So
I hope so. That's why I mentioned it also. I hope that you can.
Yeah, maybe we can share some information about that as well when you have it, because I definitely think there'll be a few listeners interested. What, from the point of view of you talked about just then the scouting and maybe not having enough manpower for things like scouting analysis, which are very time-consuming tasks sometimes. What's your perspective on the processes that you build for recruitment? How do you do your scouting? How do you do your analysis? Talk to us maybe about the team that you have, or how you're looking to sort of change it, and also how that applies to even coaching, because you mentioned about how your current manager was recruited, and you looked at different elements. You did an analysis, you said. So could you just talk to me about not only the player recruitment, but also the manager recruitment, that process, how that went to end up sort of recruiting Alfred Johansson, the Swedish manager?
Yeah, we can start with the head coach question, because of course, from when we started the initial process of the strategy and working out the club foundation for the coming years, one of the first thing we looked at was of course the head coach position, because we needed someone who was able to bring that identity and what we want to be, bring it to life, if you will, and I think that is the most difficult work in a football club, because there are a lot of good coaches out there, and we even have good coaches in our academy. We see good coaches in other academies. We see good coaches in other teams, but every club is different, and the most difficult task, I think, is to bring the team or the club's identity and the way they want to be on the pitch into life, and I think it's also the reason why head coaches doesn't succeed and have to go. It could be, of course, lack of ability to do that, but it could also be because of clubs are not good enough to be clear about what they want to want the head coach to bring it to life. So when we had that in place, this is what we want to be. This is how we want to play. I think it was it's wrong to see it was an easy job to do, but it was easy to take some coaches and say, no, this is not right. This is not right. And then we went quite wide. We wanted someone from Scandinavia initially, because we wanted someone, as I also mentioned, as a advantage for me, that we had someone who knows about the club, who knows about the identity, who knows about the league, and also the Scandinavian players, who can communicate easy with them, because most of our team, of course, is from Scandinavia. So we made a quite long shortlist of coaches from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, also some other countries like Germany also, but we focused mainly on the Scandinavian, and then we started to look into those coaches. How is the team that they coach now, or the team that they are coached before playing, and then we made a even shorter list based on that, scoring them in different parts of the different phases of the game. How good is this team that he coaches in build up? How good is this team that he's coaching in the high pressing, and so on?
And you scored that. You scored that manually, or was that kind of like using a data tool or something like that, or just kind of an internal process?
Both, but of course, when you pick a coach from an under-19 team,
because that's
a lot of data to build on.
Yeah.
We also had some youth national team coaches on that list, so the data wasn't that comprehensive. So we had also to do a lot of subjective coaching. No, not coaching, scouting ourselves. Yeah. So, but we did both, and we also, when we managed to get the list down to around 10 or 9 names, we also used a external company also to assess those coaches, to get the second opinion on them, because of course we have our understanding of this and that, and they came in and had some really good perspectives, and we also looked at, when we had the lists short enough, we also looked at the persons, how will they be in the Rosenborg system, how will they be in a media situation, how will they be with talking to the fans, talking with the other employees of the club, and then from doing that, Alfred stood out, and then when we also got to the point when we sat down and talked to him, I think we were me and the sport director and the CEO, we were quite sure that this is our number one guy. And then also next part was to also present this to the board and get them also set on the idea, and of course luckily the board we have is good, and they understand that the work that we do in the sport division of the club is good and thorough, and we managed to get our first choice right away, so that's good.
No, it's fascinating for me because even from the point of view of youth coaches, I just wonder, like I've just sort of completed a master's degree in football business, and I wondered, did you do things like maybe personality tests, or you mentioned an external company? Was it looking at the coaching, or was it looking at personality as well? Like, because for example, you mentioned press conferences. I mean, for example, an under-19 coach won't have too many high-level press conferences maybe to deal with necessarily. So it's interesting how you weight the different factors, or is it more the meeting and sort of like you said, when you met Alfred, there was a real good feeling and strong feeling with him.
Yeah, it was, and he has this charisma that you will see immediately when you meet him. And also, I don't want to go too much into what the external company did, but of course they did a lot of background checks, talking with people who had been working with or working close to, or even competing against the other person. So from that, we were also able to kind of have a good understanding of how he could be handling media situations, even though he hadn't done a lot of it, of course, being a youth coach. But even in FC Copenhagen under 19, there are more pressure and more media than in some of the smaller clubs in the Elite.
Yeah,
so
true.
I think even though it's I know here in Trondheim there were a lot of focus of him being a youth coach when he started, but a youth coach is not a youth coach if you play
of course.
Youth Champions League, or when you're a part of a big organization as FC Copenhagen.
Of course.
It's a pretty good coach.
He's done a good job so far, of course, as well, and handled the pressure well. From your point of view as well on the players, recruitment of players, because you've already, like you said, been active in the transfer market. How do you do the scouting and the analysis and that kind of thing? Is it just talk to us a little bit about your process, your vision, how you like to work as a club?
Yeah,
because obviously there's, like, for example, the agent dynamic, there's the data dynamic, there's different dynamics in their recruitment.
So that's been a big process for me coming in firstly as a first team analytics, and then over to scout, and then now head of everything in the scouting department. It's been a process to try to build more of a data approach to it. From before, it's been mainly focusing on live scouting, video scouting, subjective assessment from good scouts with good eye and a good understanding of the game. But we need also to have more information, to have more knowledge about the player when we're making such big investments. And also, if you look at the possibility to also make it a good investment. We are working now closely together with a Norwegian company, actually. Really talented guys who have been building this platform for us, where we are able to connect the data part of it with the subjective or objective scouting from the live scout and video scout. So I think we have a good system for it. I think also the last couple of, or even 3 or 4 transfer windows shows that we are able to find good talented players with a high possibility to be a good investment also. And I will also have to say that I think it is important also because we, of course, talking about scouting and structure and data and everything. But the main reason why I think we are in a good situation now is that we started focusing on, we can start big projects and find good players. But if we find good players and put them into a shit system, they will still be shit players. To say it directly. So the main reason for us being more on a path to success now is that we have a good structure around the team. We have a good head coach, but we also have fantastic assistant coaches. We have a good medical department. We have a good performance department, the physical coach. We have a team manager who is taking care of the player care, who is taking care of the new players coming in, making sure that they are integrated into not only the team but also into the city, that they have an apartment, that they got the car, that they kids can go to kindergarten, and maybe also fixing a job for their girlfriend or something. And making sure that when we do those investments, that the players coming in can succeed. Because I think in the past also there have been a lot of good players coming in here, but we weren't able to develop them.
Of course.
It's not always the players' fault. It's often the club's fault, I would say.
The structure, And is that quite new? You mentioned a lot of things there, like player care, having the right structure around the player to make sure that they can. Is a lot of that quite new in Rosenborg, or is it? How long does that take?
Yeah, it is, and I will also say it's quite new in Norway because we have for many years in Norway had a quite traditional setup, and I think some teams or some clubs have been better on it because we have some clubs who have had a lot of players from Africa coming in, or had a tradition of bringing even players outside Europe in, and that takes a lot of more work to integrate them into a totally different culture and everything. So, but in Rosenborg also we have had people who have been doing those jobs, but this is more put into system now, and I think it's also important to think of the new generation coming up. Also, I think the younger generation now they need more love. They need more people around them, I think. And we as a club, we need to make sure that they, of course, put the high demands, make sure that they're ready to compete under the pressure that it is to play for Rosenborg, but we also need to take care of them outside the pitch and make sure that they also can develop as persons and as people. So talking about scouting, I think that is an important thing that we do, because as I said earlier, with maybe a lack of manpower in some areas, it's also due to the focus that we put the structure around the team first, invest in positions there, and then in the coming years we can see and start to maybe also invest in manpower in different areas, and especially in scouting. That is a priority for us. But
it's really
working, of course, as I said, with the integrating data more into the scouting part of it, and then of course also putting that game model and the player profiles that we have set into also those data models, so that we can filter and put player profiles into it, and then see more also from a data perspective who we think will be good for Rosenborg, and who is a Rosenborg player.
Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. I think it's 100% correct. In terms of structure, it's not just about buying players, is it? It's you can buy good players, but like you just mentioned there, if they're not fit for the system, and I can think about my own team when I think about that. Man United. If you have a wrong system for the players, then it doesn't matter what formation you play or whatever, like you said. So it's very interesting. Let's bring it before we wrap up. I mean, thanks so much for your time. You've been really, really generous with your time. Per, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, let's talk about the squad, because obviously, as you mentioned, the recruitment's, like you said, been done, quote unquote, unless you find the next one with Dini or something, maybe. But just looking at the squad, at the moment you've brought in a few players. The likes of Dino Islamovic has returned. Noah Saka, who I think quite a few people have kind of talked about as highly rated potentially. A few players have left, like Jaden Nelson, Leo Kornick, and others have left over the sort of last year or so. I was a really big fan of Tenningsted, by the way. We talked about him a lot on the podcast when he was there. That was a great player at the time. But I think the main player probably that a lot of people on this podcast would want to have know about from your point of view is Sverre Nypan, who is obviously the 18-year-old talent, midfield talent that everyone is talking about. As I mentioned, we have a partnership obviously with Y Scout, and we've actually written about him on the blog. We write a monthly blog for Y Scout about Scandinavia, and his name has come up a few times on those sort of young talent lists. Talk to us about the part A, the squad building in general. You sound quite satisfied so far, like you say, but also just tell us a little bit about Sverre. He's come through your academy, so he's someone that he might have been that 14-year-old that you talked about that you knew about, many years, and you had to develop and get a place for him. And then, of course, there was a lot of links in January, especially in England with Arsenal. So just wanted to, could you talk to us a little bit about the squad, and then obviously Sverre Nypan from your point of view, how he came through his development, etc.
Yeah, of course we can do that. I can talk about Nypan first. First of all, a fantastic guy. I coached him for 2 years in academy, and he's like the perfect captain. He was already back then. He's so mature, and he still is. When you talk to him, it's difficult to understand that he's 18 years old. And he's a smart guy, and he has a good I think plan for his future inside his head, and he should be allowed to keep him to itself at the moment, and for him now to decide to play for Rosenborg still on, I think it's also a good sign for the club that he feels that he can develop here still. And of course, this season will also be maybe the first season that he enters being a key player. He's now the number one player in our squad. Last year he was a young player still, 17-year-old, but of course massive expectations. But this year he will be a key player and play a key factor in our team, and so I think that is really important. And at some point, of course, he will succeed on a higher level than we are, and go to a bigger club. And I think also he has the potential, of course, to be able to make it into the top 5 league. I'm not worried about that. So fantastic guy, and we are happy to have him, and we also are happy that he wants to be here and see Rosenborg as a place where he can still develop. That is good for our team.
At what age did you said you coached him? At what age did you coach him? And also, what are the sort of like technical qualities that you think he has in terms of what makes him a good player from your point of view? What were the skills that stood out for you?
Yeah. I coached him when he was 13 and 14. So I was when he was when he was first entering our academy, I was
So you're the man
and
there. You helped start this whole this whole.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that. You have to be blind to not see the talent of that kid. So I won't take the credit for that. He would be there anyways. But yeah, it was also for me as a coach a good experience to coach him, because he was good, and as you mentioned, his qualities it was the same then as it is now. He was so strong and able to handle the ball so fast. He can take on players. He can go past them. He can create stuff, and also he's there on the final third, being able to score, being able to give the assist. So I think he will be in the future a really good offensive midfielder for any team. But it's still the same quality he has now. Was also what stood out when he was younger. It's the ability to break lines with ball, without the ball, and make things happen.
Was he sort of known about? Was he known about even at that age in the club? Was there like a sort of a buzz? We've got this really good 13-year-old, or from your point of view, was it kind of his growth, his trajectory? Did he develop at a certain age, or was he always known about, like you said? And also, how has he evolved maybe from the time you coached him to maybe now? And maybe what areas do you think he can also maybe further improve in, from your point of view?
Yeah, of course he was known about, and it was interest from other clubs back then also. But yeah, as you know, the academy of Rosenborg has a tradition of bringing good Norwegian players up to high level. So there was some clubs in Scandinavia that were interested in him back then, and maybe also other teams, but I didn't hear of it. But I think I lost the last part of your question there. What is?
Yeah, just
his improvement.
What can he maybe the skills he has now? Did he have them at that age, and what can he develop next? If you know what I mean. Yeah. You said now he's going to be a key player. What are the next things maybe that you think he can improve in, or is he already the complete package in your point?
Yeah, I think of course, if he's going to play on a higher level, of course he needs to be even better and even sharper in the things he does good now. That's for sure. So of course, still developing the things that he's good at is important, because that is what's going to make him the great player in the future. But I think also maybe some defensive part of the game he can still maybe improve a bit and be better in different parts of the high press and the medium block. But all in all, he's also one of the best players in the league, of course. So to develop, maybe that it's the right time to go at some point also. So
no, it sounds like we've watched him many times. I mean, I remember watching him in, I think it was against Hearts or against the Scottish European game, and he was really impressive. Just finally on that, I don't know if you're able to say, but of course there was a lot of rumours with Arsenal and links. Can you tell it from the club's perspective? Like, what was it the club's? Was it his decision? Was there an agreement? Do you know what I mean? Are you able to sort of say what happened there in that situation? Because obviously,
I don't want to comment on that. We have a good relationship with him and with his people. So the communication with him and the club is really good, and he wants to be here at this time in this part of his career, and thinks that is a good development for him. And when things happen, we will see.
Fantastic. And
sorry that I can't give you a good headline now, but
no problem. I mean, in January there was a lot of talk about him in England, and then that kind of went slightly quiet. But of course, I respect the fact that it's difficult to talk about.
Yeah, of course, everyone could see that he was in England. He was also on TV and pictures of him there. So we won't deny that. But but what was the topic of that talks and what came out of it? We keep to ourselves, and he also wants to keep it to himself. So
yeah, that's fair. Totally fair enough. And in terms of the squad, it's in general, like you said, the new players that you have, it sounds like you're satisfied with the trajectory of the squad as well. Not just Sverre, but also other players.
Yeah, we are. And the most important thing is, of course, that we managed to keep a lot of the players from last season. Edvard Tagseth, of course, went out, moved to MLS. but that we knew about it quite early, so we were able to manage for a plan for what we want to do. We signed Henrik Slettsjö from Swedish First Division. We signed him early. I think it was back in September. We signed him because his contract was running out. We managed to keep Mustafa Seydan for one more year on loan from Malmö, who was a big part of our good performance in the fall. And then, of course, we took the option we had for Noah Sasa and made it permanent. Unluckily for him, he got an injury now this weekend in a friendly game, so he will be out for some time. But of course, will be a long-term investment for him. We have a long contract, and we really look forward to see what he can do. And you mentioned also, or first we can also say that we also signed Iver Fossum, who is a former national team player in Norway, who was in a very young age a really good player in the Eliteserien, almost like a Sverre Nypan hype, but not at the same level maybe in terms of clubs who are interested. But he's still only 29 years old and is a really good player. And when we lost Edvard Tagseth, Iver Fossum is a really good replacement for him. And then, as you mentioned, and also we took Jonas Mortensen, right fullback from Esbjerg, who was a captain in Esbjerg at only 23 years old. Really interesting guy. And then at last, Dino Islamovic that you talked about. And I think he is one of the examples that I talked about earlier with good players into a shitty system makes shitty players. He is a really talented player who can score a lot of goals, and he has been a bit unlucky with his career choices. And when he were here last time, he even managed to score a lot of goals. He almost had a 0.5 goal advantage, and we sold him to Asia. And when he came there, he got injured right away, and then needed to restart his career a bit again in Kalmar and scored 14 goals last season. And I think in our system now, in the way we want to play, and the guy that he's also really good with the young kids. He's also like a calm and almost like a father figure inside the locker room. So I think he will have a good impact on this squad. And also pushing Noah Holm, who is a younger striker who needs someone that pushes him and competes with him to get even better. So I think the setup we have now is really really good, and we also managed to sign new contracts with Adrian Pereira, with Marius Broholm, and also Noah Holm that I mentioned. So I think the squad is good, and we hope that we can perform even better than last season, and if that makes us end up higher on the table, we will see. But I think the performance of the team in general will be better this season for sure.
Yeah, it's funny, Dino Islamovic. It makes me feel a bit old because we've been doing this podcast for 6-7 years, like I said, nearly 8 years actually, funnily enough. But when he was at Östersunds, obviously in Sweden, it was around the time that we started. We've talked about him a lot on the show because he always seems to like be involved. You know, at Östersunds he did quite well. We had Ian Birchnell, the head coach there. We've had a few people from Östersunds on the podcast as well. Then you say, then he went to Rosenborg, of course, so we talked about him a lot then. And then when he came back to Kalmar last season, of course, he's sort of up and down, isn't he, sometimes? And then Kalmar just suddenly exploded at the last part of the season and nearly kept them up from getting relegated. So, he's someone we've talked about a lot on this show. So it'll be interesting to see how now he's 31. I can't believe that. But it'll be interesting to see how
I get a bit frustrated because people, some of the critique of that signing is that he's too old. And I'm 34, and I don't feel old. And he's only 41. He can play for a long time.
Too old in Norwegian football. I think he can still do a job.
No, I don't think so. And of course, also when he came here the first time, it was also the COVID-19 season when we played with no audience. It was not good. So I think he also feels good of having this restart in Rosenborg, and really wants to, as he said, I'm 31 now. I want to win something. So he was really set on the next move is going to be to a club that he thinks can win something. And
sounds like he's really motivated. That's really good. Final question, Per. Thank you, like I say again, for your time. From your point of view as a technical director, If you were given advice, like obviously you just mentioned that you're only 34 and you're in such a high position. If you were given advice, maybe people who want to get into football, maybe in the technical director role, that kind of side of it, what would you be maybe lessons that you've learned from your career so far, the advice you would pass on to someone listening, if they were looking at that perspective as a future job?
Yeah, I got those questions a lot, but I don't really know how to answer it, to be honest. But what was this? Yeah, what made me be able to go into this role is that I always took those opportunities that were in front of me. From early on, when I first started this club, I quit a full-time, good paid job to only work here as a part-time, and then living in a small apartment with with no space, just to be able to work with football, because that was my passion. And then also when other opportunities came along, I took them. So maybe that is something close to a good question. When the opportunities come, then just take them. And of course, the only thing you can do to build for your own success is hard work and good luck. So make sure that the hard work is there. The luck you can control.
No, fantastic. Per Jarle Dalum, thank you so much for joining us, Technical Director of Rosenborg BK. I mean, yeah, like you said, sacrifices at the end of the day, isn't it? It sounds like you've made sacrifices in the early part of your career, leaving a full-time job, and sort of, like you said, the hard work to get to where you've got to. So I've no doubt Rosenborg fans will be excited to listen to this, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure, and really nice to talk football with you. You are prepared well, so that was
thank you.
That was good.
Good stuff. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll wrap this show up then. Steve will be back joining us very soon. He hasn't disappeared, don't worry. But as we build to the new season, of course, it's not too far away now. So stay tuned on the Nordic Football Podcast. You can find us obviously like on Twitter and X, on the YouTube channel, or wherever you get your podcasts as well. Of course, Spotify, iTunes. We'll be back very soon. Take care, and thank you for listening.